Ben Foster had built his marketing empire through discipline and hard work. As CEO, he prided himself on knowing everything that happened within his company's walls. So when he noticed one employee consistently staying hours after everyone left, his curiosity turned to suspicion. Why would a new hire with average performance spend night after night alone in the office? Security footage showed her using the company showers at midnight. Employee records revealed inconsistencies. Something wasn't adding up. What Ben discovered when he followed Lucia Reyes to a darkened parking lot would shatter everything he thought he knew about success, sacrifice, and the human spirit. A startling revelation that would not only change two lives forever, but also expose a powerful enemy's darkest secrets. In a world where we rarely look beyond the surface of our coworkers' lives, this story reminds us that behind every quiet employee might be an extraordinary battle, and that sometimes the most profound acts of courage happen far from the spotlight, in the shadows of a supermarket parking lot at midnight. The overhead lights of the Foster Marketing Group building dimmed automatically at 6:30 p.m., signaling the end of another workday. One by one, employees packed their belongings, exchanged tired goodbyes, and filed out of the sleek downtown office. All except for Lucia Reyes, who remained hunched over her desk in the far corner of the design department. Ben Foster stood at his office window, peering down at the now empty workspace. At 42, Ben had built his marketing agency from nothing, working 18-hour days and sacrificing weekends for years. Now, with over 100 employees and an impressive client roster, success had finally arrived. But old habits died hard. Ben still found himself at the office long after everyone else had left. Everyone except Lucia. Ben watched as the young woman adjusted her desk lamp and continued working. He had noticed this pattern since her arrival 3 months ago. While her portfolio had been impressive enough to secure the job, her day-to-day work was adequate. Nothing exceptional. Nothing that justified the late hours she consistently put in. Something didn't add up. The intercom on Ben's desk buzzed. "Mr. Foster? I'm heading out now. Thanks, Diane. Have a good evening." Ben responded to his executive assistant before turning his attention back to Lucia. He pulled up the company's key card access logs on his computer. Sure enough, Lucia's card hadn't been used to exit the building before 11 p.m. any night this week. What could she possibly be working on for all those hours? The next morning, Ben arrived early as usual, coffee in hand, and made his way through the office. He paused at Lucia's desk. It was immaculate. No personal photos, no decorative items, just the essentials. The only personal touch was a small, handmade clay pot with a tiny succulent plant. He quickly checked her computer screen. A half-finished banner design for their newest client, a national coffee chain. The work was clean, professional, but nothing revolutionary. Admiring the plant? Ben startled, nearly spilling his coffee. Vanessa Thompson, his HR director, stood behind him with an amused expression. Just checking in on the new campaign. Ben recovered smoothly. Lucia's working on the coffee chain account. Vanessa nodded, her auburn hair bouncing slightly. At 35, Vanessa had been with the company for 8 years and had an uncanny ability to read people. She's an interesting one, isn't she? Ben raised an eyebrow. How so? Well, she's qualified, obviously. Her portfolio showed real talent. But there's something guarded about her. She never joins the team for lunch or happy hours. Never talks about her life outside work. Some people prefer privacy, Ben countered, though he'd noticed the same thing. True, Vanessa conceded. But most people at least have photos on their desk. Or mention weekend plans. Or, leave the office at a reasonable hour. She lowered her voice. The cleaning crew mentioned she's here nearly every night until midnight. They've started leaving the small break room light on for her. Ben frowned. Any performance issues? None. She meets deadlines, attends meetings, does what's asked. She's just there and then not. Like a ghost. Later that morning, the design team gathered in the conference room to present concepts for the coffee chain campaign. Ben sat at the back, observing. When Lucia's turn came, she quietly walked to the front, her slender frame almost disappearing in her oversized navy blazer. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear and began presenting her concepts. "These are solid, Lucia," Nathan Palmer, the creative director, commented after her presentation. "But they're playing it very safe. This client wants something bold, something that will make waves on social media." Lucia nodded, her expression neutral. "I can revise the concepts to be more impactful." That would be great, Nathan replied, clearly expecting more pushback or creative defense from a designer. Ben studied her as she returned to her seat. There was something in her demeanor, not quite defeat but resignation, like someone conserving energy for a much bigger battle than a client presentation. After the meeting, Ben stopped Nathan in the hallway. What do you make of Lucia's work? Nathan sighed. Technically proficient but safe. Her portfolio showed so much more creativity than what she's producing now. I keep pushing her, but it's like she's just trying to fly under the radar, not make any waves. Yet she's here late every night, Ben mused. Is she? Nathan looked surprised. I assumed she was just quiet, not a workaholic. The pieces weren't fitting together, and if there was one thing that drove Ben Foster crazy, it was an unsolved puzzle. That afternoon, he called Diane into his office. Can you pull Lucia Reyes' employment file for me? The digital version is fine. Minutes later, Ben was scrolling through Lucia's application materials. 29 years old. BFA in graphic design from State University. Previous employment at 3 different design firms, none for longer than 18 months. References checked out. Standard stuff. His attention caught on her emergency contact information. Just one name, Mateo Reyes. Relationship, brother. No parents listed. Ben closed the file, leaning back in his chair. Nothing in her background check raised any red flags. So why was he so fixated on her late nights? He pulled up the office security camera feeds on his monitor. The live feed showed Lucia at her desk, focused intently on her screen. He switched to the previous night's footage and fast-forwarded. 7 p.m. 8 p.m. 9 p.m. Lucia remained at her desk, occasionally stretching or walking to the break room. At 10:23 p.m., she gathered some items from her desk drawer and headed to the women's restroom with what looked like a small bag. She emerged 15 minutes later looking refreshed, her hair damp at the edges. Was she showering at the office? The building had a small gym facility with showers in the basement, primarily used by employees who biked to work or exercised during lunch breaks. But at 10:30 p.m.? By 11:15 p.m., Lucia finally packed up her things and left the building. The parking garage camera showed her walking to an older model sedan parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the security lights. Ben felt a twinge of guilt watching these private moments. But as CEO, the security of his company and the welfare of his employees were his responsibility. Something wasn't right with Lucia Reyes, and he needed to figure out what. The next day brought a major crisis with their largest client, and Ben's concerns about Lucia temporarily took a back seat. It wasn't until he was working late that night, around 9 p.m., that he remembered her unusual pattern. He checked the security feed. Sure enough, she was still at her desk. On impulse, Ben left his office and took the elevator down to the main floor. He walked quietly through the dimly lit office until he could see Lucia from a distance. She wasn't designing at all. She appeared to be on some kind of educational website, taking notes. Not wanting to startle her, Ben deliberately made his footsteps audible as he approached. Lucia quickly switched screens to a design program before looking up, her face composed but her eyes wary. Working late again, Lucia? Ben asked casually. Yes, Mr. Foster. I wanted to revise those concepts for the coffee chain, make them bolder like Nathan suggested. Ben nodded, noticing how she subtly shifted to block his view of her screen. That's commendable dedication. But creativity often benefits from rest and fresh perspectives. I work better in the quiet, she replied softly, her fingers fidgeting with a pencil. Fewer distractions. Of course, Ben smiled. Don't stay too late. I won't, she assured him, though they both knew it was a polite fiction. As Ben walked away, he felt increasingly certain that something was very wrong. Lucia wasn't working late because she was ambitious or struggling with assignments. She was hiding something. The next morning, Ben found himself in conversation with Vanessa again by the coffee machine. Any HR concerns I should know about? He asked casually. Vanessa gave him a knowing look. Still curious about our mysterious designer? Ben shrugged. Just doing my due diligence. Well, her work is technically solid. No complaints from colleagues. Keeps to herself but isn't unfriendly. Vanessa paused. There is one odd thing, though. She asked about our health insurance coverage for dependents on her first day, seemed really concerned about it. But her file doesn't list any dependents, just a brother as emergency contact. That evening, Ben made a decision. As CEO, he needed to ensure there were no problems that could impact his company. If Lucia was involved in something illegal or concerning, he needed to know. And if she was in trouble, well, he could help with that too. So instead of staying in his office until 9 p.m. as usual, Ben left at 6 p.m. with everyone else. He got into his Tesla and drove around the block, returning to park across the street from the office, building with a clear view of the exit and parking garage. At 11:27 p.m., Lucia finally emerged from the building. Ben slid down in his seat slightly as she walked to her car, parked in the same remote corner of the lot. He waited until she pulled out onto the street before following at a discreet distance. Her driving was careful, almost hesitant. She took no evasive maneuvers, no sudden turns. After about 15 minutes, she pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour supermarket. Ben parked several rows away and watched as she got out of her car and headed into the store. He waited, wondering if he was overreacting, if this wild goose chase would end with the simple revelation that Lucia liked to do her grocery shopping late at night after work. 20 minutes later, she emerged with a single bag of groceries and returned to her car. But instead of starting the engine and driving away, she opened the back door and leaned inside. Ben frowned, straining to see in the dim light of the parking lot. Was she rearranging things? Changing clothes? After several minutes of internal debate, Ben made a decision. He quietly got out of his car and moved closer, keeping other vehicles between them for cover. As he approached, he could hear Lucia's voice, soft and gentle. "I got your favorite cereal, and they had those apple juice boxes on sale. How was your math homework? Did those videos help?" Ben froze, confusion washing over him. Who was she talking to? He circled around until he had a clear view of her open car door. What he saw made his heart drop to his stomach. There, in the reclined back seat of Lucia's sedan, was a small makeshift bed. A sleeping bag, neatly arranged with a pillow and blanket. And sitting up in this bed, dressed in pajamas and rubbing sleepy eyes, was a young boy. He couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 years old. "Can I have juice now?" the boy asked, his voice thick with sleep. "Of course, Mateo," Lucia replied, opening the carton for him. "Just one though, okay? We need to make them last." As Ben watched, hidden between parked cars, the terrible reality dawned on him. Lucia Reyes, his employee, wasn't just working late. She was living in her car with her little brother. And suddenly, everything made terrible, heartbreaking sense. Ben Foster stood frozen between the parked cars, the weight of what he was witnessing pressing down on his chest. He watched as Lucia tenderly brushed the boy's dark hair out of his eyes, her movements filled with a gentle care that went beyond sisterly affection. This was the fierce protection of someone who had become both mother and father to a child who wasn't hers. "Did you finish your homework before you fell asleep?" Lucia asked, her voice so different from the reserved, quiet tone she used at the office. The boy nodded, taking small sips of his juice. "Ms. Henderson said my science project was the best in class. I told her my sister helped me research it on her work computer." Lucia's face flickered with worry. "Remember what we talked about, Mateo? We have to be careful about mentioning that we sleep in the car," Mateo finished, his young voice carrying a maturity that broke Ben's heart. "I know. I didn't tell her anything. I just said you helped me." "Good boy," Lucia smiled, the pride evident in her expression as she ruffled his hair. "Now, we need to get you ready for bed. For real this time." Ben backed away slowly, careful not to make any noise. He returned to his car, his mind racing. The mysterious late nights, the shower at the office, the educational websites he'd glimpsed on her screen, they weren't for her. She was using the office resources to care for her brother. And after everyone left, she was creating some semblance of normalcy for a child who had no home. As he drove home to his spacious lakeside house, Ben couldn't shake the image of that small boy curled up in the back seat of an old sedan. He had misjudged Lucia entirely. Far from being someone trying to take advantage of the company, she was someone desperately trying to hold her life together while caring for a child. Sleep eluded Ben that night. By morning, he had made a decision. He wouldn't confront Lucia directly. That would only embarrass and possibly frighten her. But he needed to understand her situation better before he could help. The next day, Ben called Vanessa into his office and closed the door. "I need you to look into something for me, but with absolute discretion," he began, his tone serious. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Of course. What's going on?" "It's about Lucia Reyes. I need you to find out everything you can about her family situation, particularly regarding her brother. And I need you to check if she listed a current address on her employment forms." Vanessa looked surprised. Are we concerned about fraud? No, Ben said firmly. I'm concerned about her welfare. This stays between us, Vanessa. No documentation, no digital trail. Vanessa studied his face for a moment before nodding. I'll be discreet. Later that afternoon, Vanessa knocked on his door. She entered with a troubled expression. I did some digging, she said quietly, sitting across from him. Lucia and Mateo Reyes lost their parents in a car accident 2 years ago. Their father died at the scene, their mother a week later in the hospital. Lucia was named as Mateo's guardian. They lived in an apartment on the north side until 3 months ago, right before she started working here. What happened 3 months ago? Ben asked, though he suspected the answer. From what I can piece together, the apartment building was sold to a developer for luxury condos. All tenants were evicted with minimal notice. Given the current housing market and rental prices, Vanessa trailed off. She couldn't afford a new place, Ben finished. The address she listed on her employment forms is her previous apartment. Her mail is probably being forwarded to a P.O. box. Vanessa hesitated. There's more. Before coming to us, she worked at Wright Media Group. Ben's head snapped up. Thomas Wright's company? Our biggest competitor. Yes. She was there for nearly a year, then suddenly left. No recommendation letter from them in her file, which is odd for someone with her qualifications. Ben leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Thomas Wright was notorious in the industry for his cutthroat business practices. Ben had lost several major accounts to Wright's aggressive, sometimes questionable tactics. Thank you, Vanessa. Remember, not a word about this to anyone. After Vanessa left, Ben pulled up the company's project management system. He navigated to Lucia's current assignments and began reviewing her work. What he found surprised him. While her presented concepts were indeed safe and conventional, her draft folders contained dramatically different versions, bold, innovative designs that aligned perfectly with what their clients needed. But for some reason, she wasn't submitting these versions. She was playing it safe, afraid to draw attention to herself, afraid to risk her job. That evening, Ben found himself once again parked near the office, waiting for Lucia. This time, his intention wasn't to spy but to understand. When she finally emerged and drove away, he followed at a distance again, expecting her to return to the supermarket parking lot. Instead, she drove to a public park that had closed hours ago. She pulled into a secluded corner of the empty parking lot, hidden by trees from the main road. Ben parked some distance away and watched as she reclined both front seats, creating a makeshift bed. The boy, Mateo, was already asleep in the back. Ben's heart sank further. They weren't just living in their car. They were constantly moving, never staying in one place too long, afraid of being discovered by police or well-meaning strangers who might report them to child services. The next morning, Ben arrived at the office earlier than usual. He wasn't surprised to see Lucia already at her desk, her hair damp from what must have been a quick shower in the gym facilities. There were shadows under her eyes, but her workspace was immaculate, her expression composed. Ben made a decision. He walked to Nathan Palmer's office. I want to see all of Lucia Reyes' design concepts. Not just what she's presenting to clients. Everything in her draft folders. Nathan looked confused. Is there a problem with her work? Just the opposite. I think she might be holding back her best ideas. An hour later, Nathan spread dozens of printouts across the conference room table. You were right, he said, pointing to 2 distinctly different design approaches side by side. These bolder concepts are buried in her exploratory folders. They're exactly what our clients are looking for, but she keeps defaulting to these safer versions in her final presentations. She's afraid to stand out, Ben murmured, more to himself than to Nathan. What was that? Nothing, Ben replied. I'd like you to encourage her to present these bolder concepts moving forward. Tell her you found them in her folders and were impressed. Nathan nodded, still looking puzzled by Ben's sudden interest in a junior designer's work. That afternoon, Ben had his assistant schedule a company-wide meeting for the following Monday. He spent the weekend researching and making calls to contacts in real estate and social services. By Monday morning, he had a plan in place. The weekend had also given him time to piece together more of Lucia's story. A former colleague at Wright Media Group had been willing to talk off the record. According to this source, Lucia had been a rising star at the company until she'd had a falling out with Thomas Wright himself. The details were hazy, but it involved some questionable accounting practices she had accidentally discovered while working on their annual report design. She was shown the door the next day, his contact had said. No severance, no reference. Thomas made it clear she'd never work in this industry again if he had any say in it. Most of us were too afraid to stay in touch with her afterward. This revelation added another layer to Lucia's precarious situation. She wasn't just struggling financially. She was trying to rebuild her career after being blacklisted by one of the most powerful figures in the industry. At the Monday morning meeting, Ben stood before his assembled employees. As many of you know, Foster Marketing Group has had a tremendous year of growth, he began. With that success comes responsibility, not just to our clients, but to our community and to each other. He paused, scanning the room until his eyes found Lucia, sitting quietly in the back row. Today, I'm announcing a new company initiative. Foster Marketing Group will be partnering with Urban Housing Solutions to create an emergency housing assistance program for employees facing unexpected life challenges. This program will include short-term housing options, rental assistance, and resources for finding permanent affordable housing. A murmur of approval swept through the room. Ben continued, carefully avoiding looking at Lucia. Additionally, we're establishing a dependent care program, offering extended hours at our partner childcare facility for employees who need to work late or have non-traditional schedules. This will be available starting next week. After outlining a few more details, Ben concluded the meeting and returned to his office. He wasn't surprised when Vanessa appeared in his doorway shortly after. That was quite an announcement, she said, closing the door behind her. Coincidental timing? Ben met her gaze steadily. Everyone benefits from these programs, not just one employee. Of course, Vanessa nodded. The housing assistance application forms will be available this afternoon. I'll make sure they're distributed company-wide. Thank you, Ben replied, grateful for her understanding. 2 days passed. Lucia didn't apply for the housing assistance. Ben hadn't really expected her to. Pride and fear were powerful forces, and she had been in survival mode for too long to trust an unexpected lifeline. On Thursday evening, Ben stayed late, watching the office gradually empty. At 7, he made his way to the design department. Lucia was still at her desk, working on a new concept for a local restaurant chain. That design is excellent, Ben commented, causing her to start slightly. The way you've incorporated elements of their family history into the branding, it tells a story. Lucia looked up, surprise evident in her expression. Thank you, Mr. Foster. I've been trying to be more bold with my concepts. It's working, he assured her. Nathan showed me some of your earlier designs, too. You have a unique perspective that our clients need. She smiled tentatively, and for a moment, Ben could see the confident designer she must have been before her world fell apart. Lucia, he continued, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. I've noticed you work late almost every night. Her smile disappeared instantly, replaced by a guarded expression. I like to maximize my productivity, she said carefully. I understand. But I wonder if you've had a chance to look at the new company benefits I announced on Monday. She shifted uncomfortably. They sound very generous. They're not charity, Ben said gently. They're investments in our most valuable assets, our people. Including you. Lucia looked down at her hands. Mr. Foster, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm fine. Really? Ben debated internally, then decided to take a risk. Lucia, I know about Mateo. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. How did you? It doesn't matter, Ben assured her quickly. What matters is that you're an incredible sister and a talented designer who deserves support, not judgment. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. Are you going to report us? Because I can explain. Mateo is well cared for. He's doing great in school. I make sure. I'm not reporting anyone, Ben interrupted gently. I'm offering help. Real help, no strings attached. The housing program isn't public assistance. It's a company benefit you've earned with your work here. Lucia's shoulders slumped, the weight of months of constant vigilance and fear finally becoming too much to bear. We lost our apartment 3 months ago, she whispered. I had some savings, but it wasn't enough for the deposit and first month's rent on a new place. Not with the current rates. I thought it would be temporary, just a few weeks until I saved enough. But living expenses in a car add up, Ben finished for her. Gas, food, laundromats. It's hard to get ahead. She nodded, a tear finally escaping despite her efforts. Mateo is so brave about it all. He never complains. But he deserves a home, a real bed, a place to do his homework that isn't the back seat of a car or my office after hours. And he'll have that, Ben promised. The Housing Assistance Program includes immediate temporary housing in a fully furnished apartment while you get back on your feet. There's one available now. Tonight. Lucia looked up, hope and suspicion warring in her expression. Why are you doing this? You barely know me. Ben considered his answer carefully. Because I built this company from nothing, working around the clock, sacrificing everything. I thought that's what success looked like. But watching you care for your brother against impossible odds, that's real strength. That's the kind of person I want on my team. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key card. This is for an apartment 10 minutes from here. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. It's yours for as long as you need it, as part of your employment package. He placed it on her desk. No paperwork required tonight. We can handle that tomorrow. Lucia stared at the card, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for it. I don't know what to say. Say you'll pick up your brother and give him the news that he gets to sleep in a real bed tonight, Ben smiled. For the first time since he'd met her, Lucia Reyes smiled without reservation, her entire face transforming. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the key card like a lifeline. Thank you. As Ben watched her hurriedly pack her things, a weight lifted from his own shoulders. He had spent years building a successful business, but tonight he had built something far more valuable. A bridge back to humanity for someone who had been fighting her battles alone for far too long. What he didn't know, as he walked Lucia to her car that night, was that this small act of kindness was about to connect to something much larger. Something that would shake the very foundation of his industry and bring a powerful enemy directly into his path. Because Thomas Wright, the man who had fired Lucia and possibly contributed to her homelessness, had just announced his intention to acquire Foster Marketing Group in a hostile takeover. And hidden in Lucia's carefully guarded possessions was evidence that could either save Ben's company or destroy them both. 3 weeks had passed since Ben had given Lucia the key to the company apartment. The transformation in her was remarkable. Her designs had blossomed with creativity, her quiet confidence growing each day. Mateo was thriving too, according to the occasional proud updates Lucia shared during team meetings. Ben sat in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his phone rang. It was his chief financial officer, David Winters. Ben, we need to talk. Now. The urgency in David's voice was unmistakable. Minutes later, David spread several documents across Ben's desk. Wright Media Group is making moves. They've been quietly buying up shares of our company through shell corporations. At current projections, they'll have enough leverage for a hostile takeover within 30 days. Ben felt his stomach drop. Thomas Wright? But why now? We're competitors, but we operate in different market segments. Not anymore. That pharmaceutical account you landed last month? Wright has been after them for years. Word is he's furious about losing it to us. David ran a hand through his thinning hair. There's more. Our legal team discovered something odd in Wright's recent SEC filings. Some numbers don't add up, but we can't prove anything without internal documents. Ben's mind flashed to what he'd learned about Lucia's departure from Wright Media. Get the executive team together in 1 hour. And ask Vanessa to bring Lucia Reyes to my office immediately. When Lucia arrived, her expression shifted from confusion to recognition as Ben explained the situation. You worked at Wright Media before coming here. Is there anything you can tell us about their financial practices? Lucia's face paled. That's why I was fired. I was designing their annual report and noticed discrepancies in the financial statements. When I asked about them, Mr. Wright called me into his office and accused me of snooping. The next day, security escorted me out. Ben leaned forward. Lucia, I would never ask you to compromise your integrity, but if you have knowledge of illegal activities. I don't just have knowledge, Lucia interrupted, her voice steadier than Ben had ever heard it. I have proof. She explained that on the day she was fired, fearing she might never work again, she had copied the original files containing the discrepancies. I never intended to use them. I just wanted protection in case he tried to ruin my reputation. They're on a flash drive in a storage unit with the few possessions we couldn't fit in my car. Within hours, Lucia had retrieved the flash drive. The company's legal team confirmed what they suspected. Thomas Wright had been falsifying financial reports to investors for years, inflating profits and hiding losses. This is enough to stop the takeover and trigger an SEC investigation, the lead attorney concluded. But using this information puts a target on our backs. On Lucia's back. Ben turned to Lucia. This decision has to be yours. You've been through enough. Lucia looked at the photo of Matteo she now kept on her desk, her brother smiling in front of their temporary apartment. Mr. Wright didn't just fire me. He blacklisted me across the industry. We lost our home because I couldn't find work for months. Matteo lost his childhood because of that man's greed. She straightened her shoulders. Use the files. The next morning, Foster Marketing Group filed a detailed report with the Securities and Exchange Commission. By afternoon, trading of Wright Media Group stock was suspended pending investigation. News cameras surrounded Thomas Wright as he was escorted from his office building. "This isn't over, Foster." Wright shouted at the cameras. "Someone fed you lies." 1 week later, the Foster Marketing Group gathered for an unusual announcement. Ben stood before his employees, Lucia quietly at his side. "Many of you have read about recent events involving our competitor, Wright Media Group. What you don't know is that one of our own team members showed exceptional courage in bringing the truth to light." He gestured to Lucia. "Without her integrity and bravery, our company might have fallen into corrupt hands." Applause filled the room as Ben continued. "Today, I'm announcing the formation of the Foster Foundation, dedicated to providing housing and educational support for families in crisis. And I'm pleased to announce that Lucia Reyes will serve as its director, alongside her new role as our creative director." Tears glistened in Lucia's eyes as Ben handed her a set of keys. "These are to a permanent company apartment, deeded in your and Matteo's names. It's yours regardless of where your career takes you." 6 months later, Ben Foster stood in the community room of what had once been a struggling apartment complex. The building had been purchased by the Foster Foundation and transformed into affordable housing for families in need. Children played while parents chatted with social workers and job counselors. In the center of it all was Lucia, confidently leading a design workshop for teenagers interested in creative careers. Beside her sat Matteo, now thriving in school and proudly wearing a junior mentor badge. Ben smiled, remembering the night he had followed his quiet employee to a darkened parking lot. He had expected to catch her in wrongdoing, but instead had discovered a lesson in courage and resilience that transformed not just her life, but his own understanding of true success. Thomas Wright now faced years in prison for financial fraud. His empire had crumbled, but from its ashes, dozens of families like Lucia's had found hope and new beginnings. As Ben watched Lucia laughing with the teenagers, he realized that the tears he had shed that night in the parking lot weren't just from compassion for her struggle. They were from recognition of a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest leadership lessons come not from the top of organizational charts, but from those fighting quiet battles with extraordinary grace. The quiet designer living in her car had ultimately saved his company while teaching him that true success isn't measured in profit margins, but in the lives you help transform along the way.